It's 2025. The world is a waking nightmare, but oh look, it's Pac-Man's 45th anniversary!
Oh, the kids are gonna love this!
Sure to go viral! Oh man, I'm a
Bitch!
This would be funny if it wasn't so horrible.
To those unaware, Pac-Man anniversary years have been something the series has usually made a big deal about. Pac-Man is a weird series in a lot of ways, but one of the big ones is the various hiatuses and low periods it has had. The anniversary years are usually when they release something bigger to either continue their course, or more often, try to revitalize the series. And man did it need it after the 40th. After the whole Ghostly Adventures multimedia project backfired, they largely just stuck to making smaller games. This isn't bad on its own, the arcade games are still a blast to go back and play, but with how tightly crafted the original game is, playing around with how it works or getting things wrong can quickly lead to problems. Baby Pac-Man, for instance, has ghost AI that can turn around 180 degrees at a moment's notice. The ghosts being unable to do that was one of the key things that prevented cheap deaths if you didn't have a power pellet, which is a problem when by default you don't have power pellets. Little things like that can really make your Pac-Man game not work, and when playing around with the fundamentals, you really have to make sure that the finished design still works. Games like Championship Edition DX show that you can pull it off, but in this period, they really didn't. From 2015 to 2021, the series was in a frankly dire state, but thankfully things did turn around in 2022. Developers Now Pro gave us the double hitter of Pac-Man Museum Plus, followed quickly by Pac-Man World Repack. These games managed to not only celebrate Pac-Man's history, but double down on everything that made this series great. So rest assured, things were bad for a while, but now everything's back on track. Right? In mid-2024, we started getting previews for a then-upcoming animated series produced by Amazon called Secret Level. It was a series of shorts based on different video game franchises, and while the others were faithful to the point where they were recognizable, the Pac-Man short was shaping up to be another story. This was going to be a dark, violent, and gritty take on Pac-Man. And if you're a Pac-Man fan, some red flags were probably being raised by now. To clarify, Toru Iwatani made Pac-Man in response to the number of violent action games geared for men. To push out from this trend, he made something cute with an emphasis on character, a game where even the enemies were designed to be endearing. So if this is your idea on how to adapt Pac-Man, then you have fundamentally missed the point. That's not to say that darker Pac-Man material could never work, because I actually do think there is some potential if done right. Needless to say though, I was a bit skeptical. Then that winter, the short was released and my girlfriend, in a fit of sadomasochism, pulled it up. I braced myself for something that wasn't even going to try to be faithful, and I was prepared to judge it on its own terms. A homunculus swordsman that looks weirdly like Darth Plagueis is released from a vat and is greeted by Puck. Ha! Get it? Who demands that he frees them both from the labyrinth that they're trapped in. The swordsmen must fight to adapt and survive in this harsh world. Then they get to the exit where, in order to escape, Puck must dig into the swordsman's flesh to form a hellish Pac-Man monstrosity. After being backstabbed, he rejects her and in his dying breath says,
You are the one trapped.
Then Puck goes back to where we started, greeting the next swordsman in the same way. Get it? It's another life. Whoa. Aside from how stupid that ending is, this sounds like a serviceable idea for a sci-fi story with some unnecessary Pac-Man elements, but the execution really holds it down. The script is very disjointed. It feels like they had more ideas here than they could fit into the short format. Yet they also didn't use what time they had wisely. A bulk of what's going on is told through a montage without much connective tissue. It ends up feeling more like a trailer than something actually conveying narrative. You have some lines that don't move anything forward and only exist to remind you that yes, indeed, this is Pac-Man for some reason.
You can't eat a ghost.
Of course you can. You can eat them over and over again, just never their eyes.
Conversely, there are some decent shots and ideas from time to time, but it's all just lost in the noise. It also doesn't help that all of the connections to the source material are really just surface level references, and often come across as more annoying than anything. There's an idea there, but the execution is a mess, and the format is working against it. That said, the environment and creature designs, while not being the most original, are pretty neat. Really, I wished I was just playing it as a video game. Little did I know what was to come. At the Game Awards, or as I like to call it, the annual gaze upon the dying light in Jeff Keighley's eyes, Bandai Namco announced Shadow Labyrinth, a new Pac-Man Metroidvania working off of the same premise as the secret level short. A lot of people were under the impression that it was based on the short, but actually, it was the other way around, with development of the game starting in 2020. At this point, I didn't know how to feel. After all, if my central problem with the short was how the format worked against the larger story they wanted to tell, a game devoted to the concept gives you a lot more time to explore it, so it mitigates the issue. Plus, even if the story falls flat, I have more time to enjoy the gameplay, visual design, and other such elements. However, right off of the bat, I was skeptical of how it would work as a Pac-Man game, and not just for the reasons you're thinking. A Pac-Man Metroidvania on paper sounds like a no-brainer because, well, they're big mazes, and Pac-Man is most well known for its maze gameplay. However, more challenges present themselves the more you look into it. Pac-Man mazes aren't exactly traditional mazes. There are no dead ends, you can't get lost, everything is laid bare and obvious, and the goal isn't to find your way out, it's to do everything you possibly can. Functionally, they're more completion-focused obstacle courses. This is why the series tends to translate better into things like platformers, puzzle action games, or other genres that can lend themselves to that with a high skill ceiling, while also being mechanically simple. Conversely, Metroidvanias don't just tend to be mechanically complex, but the progression is directly tied to that. In Metroid, you'll reach roadblocks you can only overcome with a mechanic that you don't have yet, so you go back, explore the other paths open to you, and use the process of elimination to figure out which one has the new ability you need and where to go from there. Castlevania Symphony of the Night not only does this, but works in RPG inventory systems and combos akin to a fighting game. Very much on the opposite end of the spectrum from a Pac-Man game. Speaking of which, very early on we saw that this game was going to have a heavier emphasis on combat, another thing that not only tends to lead to mechanical complexity, but also something the series has struggled with in the past. Pac-Man World 3 also tried to be a darker, more story-driven take on the series with an emphasis on combat, but in part due to this exact conflict, the combat ended up very stripped down and unengaging, mostly just leading to mashing the same button over and over again. Now, maybe they're not trying to make it play like Pac-Man, but rather a game that breaks it all down to its most recognizable characteristics and starting from scratch. It was marketed as an alternate take after all, an Act Zero, if you will. So maybe it's not fair to judge this game as far as how it carries Pac-Man design traits to a Metroidvania, except for the fact that developers have gone on record saying that's what they were trying to do. That said, I was going to ignore that, and figured that it would just be an okay game on its own terms. After all, it's not like this genre is untread ground. It's more common to find a painfully derivative and mediocre Metroidvania as opposed to an outright abomination. So I was sure that outside of the rather niche Pac-Man fandom, the game would be relatively well received among fans of Metroidvanias. Then the game came out and people were calling it an abomination. Reviews on Steam were mixed, and by that there were people with a lot of major complaints, and even the positive reviews were largely just responses to the negative ones. Common complaints were the annoyingly sparse checkpoints, bad controls, broken hitboxes, and terrible level design. There were people saying that it felt AI generated, and describing the game as fundamentally broken, citing that the only way to make the game good would be to start over. Don't hold out for a patch. This deeply fascinated me. Pac-Man games tend to be very simple on the surface, so a lot of people don't look at them too deeply. Needless to say, I don't operate that way. Sure, When a new mobile game would be released or whatever, I'd hear people complain that it's not a big platformer or whatever, but even in dissenting discussions, I'm not used to hearing critiques that specific until I make them.
So you have a competitive game where you're bombarded by elements outside of your control, some of which kill you, being erratically spawned in a game where oftentimes your only options are to move forward or back. And in a game about being chased. Wow, that didn't take long.
So seeing that kind of feedback immediately upon the game's release certainly piqued my interest. That said, a Pac-Man game getting a harsher reputation than it deserves is unfortunately not uncommon, especially outside of the maze format. So let's go into this working our way up to a verdict as opposed to the other way around. Also, for full transparency, I 100% completed this game on August 9th, 2025, weeks before the first major patch, and months before the more dramatic one in November. That said, I did replay the game with each patch. For now, I'm going to largely put the changes the November patch made on hold so I can give more context into how they changed the game more properly, but I will bring them up from time to time when I deem it appropriate. Alright, enough stalling. Let's play this sucker. Well, this is a good sign. The game starts up with the standard bombastic linear opening to highlight mechanics you'll unlock later. In this case, it's the Gaia form, and first impressions are not great. The controls, despite the fast movement, are very sluggish, and at this point, the only thing you can do with it is the same punch attack. Well, that happened fast. Except there, it's... and here it's... Please tell me this isn't what the combat is like. Afterwards, you take control of your homunculus that looks weirdly like a tall armless Jawa, and pick up your sword, which thankfully controls better than the mech, and right off the bat you have more mechanical versatility. Consequently, the preview of the Gaia mech at the start feels less like a tantalizing sneak peek at the power you'll get later, and more like a warning. That said, while not as extreme, the issues with the controls are still here and are very apparent. In order to get into why, we actually need to talk about the game's visuals. This game uses rigged animation for pretty much everything, which isn't inherently bad, but it does make the game look like a cheap, scammy mobile game you'd see in YouTube ads, especially in the cutscenes. So the association would probably set off alarm bells in people. It doesn't help that the animation itself, even accepting the rigged system for what it is done very poorly, especially when the end goal is to use it in an action game. In games, there's a balancing act between animation and control. When the player presses the button, they expect the resulting action to be as instantaneous as possible. However, the animation depicting it can only happen after you press the button. When a game sets the desired behavior to happen after an animation cycle, this creates a delay between the player pressing the button and the action taking place. Finding the right balance can be really detail-oriented, and is highly dependent on what your end goal is. This is a 2D game with sword combat. Some games like this have the first frame of the animation be the full sword swing for immediate impact. Others have a short lead up to give a sense of weight, while also having it still be fast enough to have that sense of immediacy. However, this game does something quite odd. The impact wave that actually hits the enemies doesn't appear until after the sword has already made a complete swing and returned to your body, and the collision doesn't kick in until the frame after that. So even in the most ideal circumstances, not only do you have to account for the delay between you pressing the button and the sword reaching the enemies, but you have to wait until the whole swing is finished, and even that's 2 frames away from any damage being inflicted upon the enemy. It's also very clear that the same mercy that the game grants to enemies is not given to you. You have a very long cooldown period, and while that's usually the longest part of a sword swing animation in a game, this game takes it too far. The sword collision against enemies also has a very narrow window, so for most of the animation, you're not going to do a thing to them. After making a 3-swing combo or a stronger ESP attack, especially in the air, you're a sitting duck. Swinging the sword will halt your horizontal and vertical movement before you slowly hover to the ground as you wait to be able to do anything again before an enemy just casually overlaps with your hitbox and kills you. This is also not accounting for things like input lag, which very easily can be a factor. Now, the November patch did address mid-air control, and this is the part where normally I would compare the different releases in a direct, measured test. But I can't do that because they won't let you download the previous versions on Steam.
Makes you look like you got something to hide.
So, okay, the game could control better, but surely some good enemy design to work against can make it interesting. Sure, maybe you're a clunky lump of lard, but maybe the combat is slower and more strategic. Okay, maybe not, but maybe it can still be something engaging, right? Well, I have bad news for you. There are very few enemy types, with most of the enemies just being blatant reskins and recolors of each other.
There's lots of other characters if you don't like the Pixie Sorcerer.
No, there aren't. They're all just the same with different costumes.
The AI is also completely brain dead, and combat is very unengaging. Often the game will send in a large slow enemy and a few smaller counterparts that are faster, so you just kill the faster and weaker enemies that reach you first and take less damage anyway, before wiping the floor with the bigger enemy. This does not escalate. It just stays like this throughout the whole game. So why did so many people, both praising and bashing it, call this game hard? The game starts you with very few hit points, with very few health upgrades in the first several hours of the game. Enemies can take out half of that health in a single attack, and early bosses can work through that real quick. Yet despite that, checkpoints are not placed near those boss fights. Checkpoints are often very far apart, so if you die, you lose a lot of progress, with it possible to be sent considerably far back into the previous environment as opposed to even the start of the map you were in. Checkpoints are also the only place you can refill on health. You do have an emergency health tank that you can activate for more health, but this doesn't trigger automatically upon losing health, so it is possible to die with health in reserve. Enemies and bosses are just hit sponges, with broken collision boxes that feel like what a modern game engine will just throw at you automatically before a designer tweaks them for purpose. Enemy and boss attacks are haphazard and poorly thought out. Everything feels like it only had one design pass, with little to no tweaking after the fact, or even taking player movement into account at all. Just throw shit at the wall in a vacuum. It might as well have been done blind. Oh well, the game has a skill tree consisting of 2 branches, and after a few upgrades for each one, you'll need to find high-grade material to continue upgrading them. Needless to say that these are rare, and only enough exist to fill out both branches all the way, so that's going to be locked off from you at the start. You come across an NPC early on who temporarily gives you a shop, but the requirements are so hilariously out of reach that it's basically pointless. By the time it isn't, oops!
Qigong!
These problems never go away either. The final boss can summon an unavoidable attack that kills you in one hit, and once you die, you need to do the entire preceding boss rush over again.
Oh god.
Time to start all of that over again!
You have to fight the sperm again. Fuck off. This game sucks.
This game isn't interested in giving you a fun or engaging challenge. It just wants to screw you over. Yet despite that, I would not call this game hard. It's too hilariously easy to exploit for that. I called the AI brain dead earlier, but it must have been written by J.J. Abrams or Chris Terrio, because it doesn't know what up is. Almost every enemy in the game is completely helpless to a downward thrust attack. You can just keep bouncing and bouncing until their stupidly long health bar depletes, and they won't be able to do a thing about it. From early game enemies to late game bosses, they either won't counter it, or will just fail to after barely trying. It's like they didn't take into account that the player could do this. This also has the benefit of not only proving how poorly thought out the combat is, but you even get a good peek at how broken the hitboxes are. This is a really lazy way to make a game difficult. Don't look at what the player can do and design enemies and levels to complement that in an engaging way. Just make everything else as hostile to the player as possible. Who needs to pay attention to enemy design in this combat-focused game when you can just do that? It's clear that between the combat being punishing and the checkpoint/bonfires doubling as skill trees, the game is trying to go for Souls-like combat. But instead of having the strategy or engaging enemy patterns needed to make that work, we get Rise of the Robots for babies, because even that forced me to change things up more often. For those in the back, this is not a hard game, it just hates you. But okay, this is a Metroidvania. Surely there are movement upgrades or different attacks to make this engaging, right? Well, after defeating bosses, sometimes you'll get a new ability either for the swordsman or the Gaia mech. These include a dash, a double jump, a grappling hook, other basic attacks for Gaia that aren't just a straight slow swipe. Yeah, that's about it. The latter of which includes this huge laser that looks like it should be really powerful. And given how you lose the mech form immediately after using it, it really seems like it should be. But no, it just stuns enemies. Yes, you heard me right. It just stuns them. And by the time the exit animation finishes, the stun period is also over. So there's basically no point, except for the first phase of the final boss rush. It takes that out with one hit. Wait. Oh well, at least it destroys the occasional color-coded wall? Okay, yeah, even fully upgraded, this thing sucks. In interviews, the devs said that they wanted this to be this game's equivalent to the Power Pellet, but it's so clunky and impractical, and the uses for it are so limited and contextual that it's very easy to waste. Every time you do, you'll have to go around absorbing every enemy you kill until the meter fills back up. It makes you invincible against attacks for a brief period, so that's handy in a badly designed boss fight or two, but otherwise it's more practical to just avoid using it. Not that the swordsman is that much better. By the end of the game, you don't feel more powerful. The game gets easier with a longer health bar, sure, but the game really doesn't give you much to work with. It's enough to gate a lot of the world off from you until you get the aforementioned upgrades, but outside of that, movement upgrades really don't expand the scope of how the game is played. Instead, what you'll find is most of the upgrades, or perks as the game calls them, are locked behind shops with aura. Yeah, not dots, not pellets, aura. Everything costs aura. The perks, the fast travel, yes really, the pathetic attempt at a skill tree. However, outside of that one NPC that appears before promptly disappearing, there aren't any shops until the village. Oh well, that shouldn't take too long to get to. 5 hours!
Get out of here.
But when you do get to that point, you don't just need to grind aura, you need to grind for the flaccid attempt at a crafting system too. You see, each enemy drops a material. By absorbing each enemy after you kill them, you collect that material. Despite the lack of enemy variety, there are a plethora of different materials to collect. Could this be where the substance is? No, of course not. You thought that you could mix and match the materials and experiment with them? What are you, high? No, they're basically treated as another currency to gate you off from them alongside the other currency already doing that. It also doesn't help that you have to unlock the ability to absorb enemies. This happens relatively early on, but you're still forced to pass by enemies that you could have been collecting resources from to begin with. There are other ways to gate you off from upgrades or places. There are sparkling stones to collect. Someone might be looking for them. And by that, the little girl in the village that takes 5 literal hours to get to. So yes, you're finding these things before you know what they're for, all the while you're hoping that it's a health upgrade or a high-grade material. So at first, these feel like a ripoff. Then you realize there are items that you can only get with them, including this object that you bring to the store which grants you, yes, the last remaining perk upgrades. Wait, did you think you'd just get them after that? No, you still need to buy them! Then in the same village area, you can buy lore from another NPC. Yes, you purchase lore. What, did you want environmental storytelling? Fuck you, give me money. Who designed this game, Adobe? Once you purchase all of the lore, another 2 environments open up to you. So if you felt like you were perpetually short of the resources that you were being asked for, you were! Oh, and finding some of the resources is a complete pain in the ass. For one, while you're told the name of the material, you're not told which enemy drops it and where to find it. You do get a stupidly tiny portrait of it if you've already come across it, but when the enemies are all reskins of each other, that hardly narrows it down. It also doesn't help that their placement can be pretty nonsensical. Like, okay, in order to get this upgrade, you need something from the Electro Bubble boss. Oh, so I go to a more technology-centric stage to find it, right? Nope, wrong. You go to the graveyard that's weirdly devoid of graves, you idiot! Alternatively, you could go to the hardest to reach part of the mine environment because yes, this game rehashes bosses. This ends up weirdly being a blessing, because with many of the materials you need from bosses, whether or not you'll get them is up to chance. Actually getting what you need lies in the hands of a weighted dice roll and not in your favor. Oh, but if you don't get it when the boss dies, it'll respawn, right? Nope, not for quite a while it won't. I hope you like waiting. So if you're trying to get a perk upgrade contingent on a material that's dropped from a boss, you go to one of its locations, be sure to use the agonizingly slow down and forward stun punch and not the down and forward slash despite both being the same buttons, capture the material when it's stunned, kill the enemy, capture that material drop, pray that either are what you want, then in the likely event that they're not, you go to the other location of that boss. If neither give you what you need that time, you fuck around and waste time in the environment, checking back once in a while to see if either have spawned back in yet. Then when you do, repeat the cycle and say, let's go gambling! However, while the smaller enemies more consistently give you what you want, they have their own bullshit, and I can think of no better example than Omega Fatty Acids Z. In the corner you can see an icon depicting a fish enemy. It's actually visible, so it must be somewhere I've been. So I go to every spot in the game that has water, which is surprisingly rare. No sighting. Then I remember that it has the weird skeletal looking design, so I think maybe it's in a pit of acid in the mines. Nope. So after searching this map high and low, trying to recall if I've ever seen that enemy in the game, I go through the roots of the tree area hoping I find anything. Then I see leaves being picked up in the air from under the dirt, roots, and rocks. I stopped dead in my tracks in order to be intentionally attacked. I thought to myself, there's no way. And lo and behold, those are the fish! I speak for the trees! Don't you know they got fish in them? Oh hey dude, you wanna go fishing? I know a good lake. No need! I know a lumberjack! Perk upgrade. Land fish. And that, children, is how we all ended up chemically lobotomized. Not by drugs, but by Shadow Labyrinth. You know, maybe I shouldn't ask this game to be more creative, because its idea of creativity seems to be, what if fish swam through the grass instead of water? Not that we can be bothered to animate that! Meanwhile, despite how tedious all of this resource farming is, some of the perks you get are disposable. You use them, you lose them. Oh boy, time to go grinding for fish again! Consequently, it's smarter to just not experiment with your inventory, because the game actively discourages it. This is something they ended up toning down in future updates, but even that doesn't help, because one of the perks you get is Satellite Plus, which breaks the combat even further. You know, just in case constantly downward thrusting was just too engaging for you. Now just activate this and it'll just kill bosses for you with barely any further input needed on your part. Wow, what great game design, and we still haven't talked about the platforming and navigation yet! So, being a Metroidvania, the world consists of different maps linked together. Most Metroidvanias tend to have an emphasis on verticality. Most Pac-Man mazes tend to have an emphasis on verticality. So, of course, in this game's pursuit to make as little sense as possible, the world is overwhelmingly horizontal. Genius! On average, there are 3 environments stacked on top of each other for each column. Well, okay, that's still some verticality there. I'm sure they'll have them linked together in some interesting ways. The problem is, the game starts off painfully linear, consisting of long, empty stretches with little to no platforming and the occasional combat section with little room for variation. Almost everything except the main path is gated behind either the grappling hook or the double jump, but mostly the former. Oh, but surely it'll open up soon enough. It's not like they'd force you on the longest and stupidest linear path possible, right? Kidding me? Yeah, remember how I said you don't reach the village until 5 hours in? Yeah, that's just before the game finally gives you branching paths and starts to open up more. And that's if you don't die repeatedly to a boss and need to cover the same overly long stretch of ground over and over again. If you do, it can easily take a fair bit longer than that. Again, linear stage progression in a game with large maps is not inherently bad. Hell, I love games like that. But instead of letting the player explore, reward them for exploring, and provide a fun sandbox to play around in, it again locks out everything from you, leaving you to slog your way through a central path so insipid that it dares to sincerely ask the question.
What would a platform game be without platforms?
This. Congrats, Shadow Labyrinth, you failed the Bubsy Bobcat School of Game Design. What are we doing here? Things thankfully do get less insufferable once the game finally branches out, but after how bad the opening hours of the game are, that's not saying much. The maps are still needlessly bloated with little worthwhile to find in them. The environments are pretty homogeneous, and the level design being so indistinct can even mess with the navigation. Simply put, it's more annoying to find your way when everything looks the same. On the other hand, when the level design does stand out, it's for all the wrong reasons. Take the Tree Root World, for instance, where the upper half of the map is just straight two-way paths with doors. Cool, you've seen everything in this direction? Now backtrack through that. Very rarely there will be a more involved platforming section, but when there is, you're quickly reminded that, oh yeah, this game is a broken mess. But okay, why is the opening so long and agonizingly linear? It's to serve the story, of course. Hell, after the secret level short, the story was the draw for a lot of people. You need to escape the maze, but the real maze is your mind. Whoa, so crazy. So, of course, those people would be absolutely delighted by the story having next to nothing to do with it. Yeah, this pissed them off. But seeing how I didn't even like the short, I was willing to see how it held up on its own merits. So turns out the tall Jawa isn't just a homunculus, he's from the real world, but got sucked into his handheld and ended up being awoken inside a capsule before, like in the secret level short, being introduced to Puck. So yes, this is an isekai. Abort mission. Repeat, abort! This is also where the similarities come to a screeching halt and plummet down a nearby cliff. Puck isn't Puck. Puck is Thebe, the soul of a UGSF soldier anime girl desperate to complete her mission to kill Gamp from Xevious. Meanwhile, you're followed by another anime girl throughout the game, who is also Thebe. But this Thebe serves Gamp from Xevious and wants to put a stop to other Thebe trying to kill him. Confused yet? Too bad! Thebe had a sister in the UGSF who disappeared and was deemed as inferior to her by her peers, so Puck Thebe feels the need to prove herself. This is visualized to us without context in the form of her reaching out for the booty. You get to a big weapon meant to pierce the way to Gamp before finding out that the UGSF want to destroy the entire planet of Xevious, which yes, is where the entire game takes place. However, Gamp warps the planet away and the attempt fails. Afterwards, you travel underground in hopes of getting the weapon operational again and find a village of Bosconians who you make a deal with to make your way to Gamp. After going back to the weapon, other Thebe does the black Pac-Man eat thing on Puck Thebe and Gamp basically says, lol, you got family issues? Which causes Puck Thebe to want to kill all of humanity, joins Gamp, and she turns into a yellow G-host.
with an extravagant ripped dress, and you fight her as a boss. You beat her, other Thebe sees the error of her ways, and the three of them team up before Puck Thebe tells the swordsman, hey, this is kinda shitty, but in order to pull this off, we all need to die. You cool with that? You accept me, right? Then they go to the core, Puck Thebe gives up on the UGSF, only to end up brainwashed again not even a minute later. You all kill Gamp and miraculously don't die. Only your brain cells are so lucky. We also see that Thebe is blonde. Get it? Because Pac-Man is yellow. Oh shit, this was supposed to be a Pac-Man game! Yeah, that's hardly come up, hasn't it? I want to make it clear that I don't think Shadow Labyrinth is a terrible game because it doesn't fit Pac-Man. No, I think Shadow Labyrinth is a terrible game because removed from that, it does literally nothing right. The level design is atrocious. The game is not fun to control. The physics are terrible. The combat might be the worst I have ever seen, and the story is horrendous. Despite not liking the secret level short, and on paper being okay with the story here being different, they handled it in the most annoying way possible. It directly calls back to it. The events of the short are canon to this game, despite making huge contradictions like Swordsman number 8 being the first of them to be able to use the sword. Yes, really. Or how about Thebe not wanting to escape the maze? She wants to do the exact opposite and fulfill her mission here. Yet, even ignoring the short, none of this works. It wants us to feel sympathetic towards Puck Thebe and her insecurity of not being good enough, but she is absurdly unlikable. Alright, it's been requested that I read the following quotes doing an impression of Cow from Cow and Chicken. Okay.
You dislike having your bodily freedom taken away? Like it or not, you're coming with me. Is that their guardian deity? Who would worship a pile of scrap metal? You can't compete with the great almighty. You might as well give up. Shut it! Don't say such things! This isn't about you, so stay out of it! Stop scolding him! Ha! You came with him? Did you fall in love with him when he saved you? Oh! That is possible.
It's clear that it wants to say something about mental health, but it doesn't have the insight required to make that land. If you feel like you're not good enough, this game isn't going to give you a path forward, put anything in perspective, or have anything smart to say about it. It just wants to look like it does, but it fails horribly. All of that is if you're paying attention to the writing at all, because it's horrible. It seems to have the strange notion that in order to make something good, you need to make it as long-winded and repetitive as possible. All of the soldier logs just amount to, we crashed and died here, or at most, did you know Galaga exists? Yeah, I think we got the memo. All of Thebe's memory logs can be boiled down to either, my sister is better than me and I'm upset, or other me is out there, I need to brainwash her too. In fact, I hope some of the people playing it haven't paid attention to the writing. I've seen people thirst after Thebe, despite her form being that of a 16-year-old. Not that this stops the game from giving her uniform boob pockets and having shots like this. Amazing! We've gone from making a game meant to appeal to women and children to having a game sexualize them to appeal to people who have never seen a woman before. Happy 45th anniversary! A lot of the fun in collecting lore logs in games like this is seeing how they interface with the surrounding environmental storytelling, with each log or entry being a single element that when looked at in conjunction with everything else reveals a grander story. But the only environmental storytelling here is, look, the big missile that's in the ground is big, and look, here's a logo that's a reference to other video game. Okay, we need to talk about the connections to other Namco games. Before release, one of the selling points was that it was part of the UGSF timeline. I found this strange because, yeah, I know what the UGSF are.
Dragoon to UGSF. Mission accomplished. Returning to base.
But I doubt the Nintendo Direct crowd they're pitching it to understands. The UGSF is the military in Galaga,
and the timeline works different Namco arcade games into the same universe. In Mr. Driller, it's revealed that Taizo Hori's ex-wife is Kissy from Baraduke, so therefore, Mr. Driller and Dig Dug are on the timeline. Oh, but the Pac-Man World games have Puka's, Figar's, and even full Galaga sections. Are they on the timeline? No! If you're thinking, wow, this timeline makes no sense, just you wait, it gets stupider! For instance, Ace Combat 3 is on here. So the rest of the Ace Combat series must be canned to the UGSF timeline, right? No, just the third one. The range of references are also really narrow and extremely shallow. The higher rank in the mazes is called New Space Order. Interesting choice. There's the occasional logo. We have the Bosconian waifus with stupid proportions, meaning they're incapable of wiping their own ass. We have the Galaga enemies in one area, including a boss that literally just sits there and lets you kill him.
Oh, it's quite all right. I've grown tired of living. Ah, very good then.
And in another area, we get "What did you do to my boy Puka?" There are some more references depicted on medals for the achievements, which also don't tell you what you need to do in order to get them, but instead are inscribed with strange, vague statements. Turmoil. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. What do you mean? Oh, hi Gilgamesh from Tower of Jiraga. I don't see you on this stupid timeline. I mean, it's not like it's featured in Mr. Driller or anything. Oh. Despite that, the game is overwhelmingly based on Zeius. It's where the game takes place, the villain is from that game, the greater conflict and lore are all rooted in Zeius. The biggest deep cut is taking baglists from the Japan-only novel Super Adventure game Zeius, but they basically only serve as upgrade kiosks as opposed to characters because their characterization is flatter than their JPEG bodies. But regardless, Zeius is the most important Namco game to this Pac-Man game. That might sound really stupid, but that should fit the UGSF stuff, right? Zeius is not part of the UGSF timeline. Yeah, from the beginning, Zeius was meant to be its own thing with its own lore. That's why it has things like a language with its own character set. Also, not only is Zeius not on the timeline, it's not even on the version in Shadow Labyrinth, but uh-oh, watch out, there's Gamp in the background orchestrating it all despite having nothing to do with anything else on screen. And if certain alarm bells are ringing, yes, the game does try to sequel bait at the end, with Gamp creating backups to go to other worlds. They're trying to give this the MCU treatment with Gamp as its Thanos. Bold considering the innumerable amount of failed attempts, some of which also spawn Metroidvanias weirdly enough. Like, this is a really poor attempt at a UGSF-themed Metroidvania. I mean, Baraduke did the whole go through these sci-fi landscapes as a guy in a robot suit, only to find out, surprise, she's a girl, thing before Metroid did. But no, none of these other games give us enough lore and we can't be bothered to write our own, so we'll make it Zeius but call it Pac-Man. But okay, Pac-Man was always more of a success in the West than it was in Japan. Zeius was always more of a success in Japan than it was in the West. Maybe this is their way of finally making a Pac-Man game for Japan. So surely they didn't mess up the Zeius stuff, right? Right? No! So on the surface, you might wonder why the world in Shadow Labyrinth looks nothing like the world in Zeius. However, if you're paying attention to the landscape, you'll see the Nazca lines. The game Zeius doesn't take place on Zeius, it takes place on Earth. They're flying over Peru. The story, as depicted in the original Zeius and explained in promo material, is that there was an advanced civilization that left Earth before the Ice Age hit, and now they want it back.
Many thousands of years ago, there was a technologically advanced civilization that lived here on Earth, the Zeius. Their powerful computers made a terrible prediction. An ice age was about to descend that would be so extreme that human life could not survive. And so the entire population left the Earth in their spacecraft to seek a new home in deep space. But now, the Zeius have come back to reclaim the planet.
Subsequent games featured Gamp as the supercomputer that ended up brainwashing everyone, leading to their assault on Earth. And now there are resistance movements against him. Now, the Zeius games are arcade games, or at the very least arcade-style games, so the story doesn't manifest in them directly too much. There are outside adaptations, including a movie that's lost media, but pretty much all of it is Japan only. Despite this, Shadow Labyrinth does not expand upon anything beyond the cutscenes from the PC Engine game. Yes, Shadow Labyrinth has the bagless characters from the novel barely in it, but it basically replaces the resistance movement from the games featuring, the Solvaloo with the UGSF. However, let's think about this. Wow, after all these games set on Earth, we're finally going to Zeius itself. Then you play it and it might as well be Zeebies. The biomes and locales are the most bog-standard Metroidvania fluff. So much so that they're not even Metroidvania. They're just Metroid. Even the enemies are either just uninspired or flat out lifted from Metroid. Like, you wanna go for creepy sci-fi designs? Baraduke is literally right there. Whoa, a single Octi-type? You're really throwing in all the punches now, aren't ya? There's a boss that's a reference to Ricky from Splatterhouse. You cut off his mask and his luscious locks of hair come forth. But he's bald. But in any case, if you're willing to draw from Splatterhouse, give us some of those designs, please. This game, despite taking place on Zeius and having the story based around it, has very little to do with Zeius. Pretty much all of their focus was on this middle slide of the PC Engine game's opening text describing how Gamp is this supercomputer that became self-aware, believes that he's a god, and has the power to control minds. This is what they capitalized on, and they do next to nothing with it. None of his dialogue goes deeper than that description, despite him being incapable of shutting up.
You have done well to lure her here. Long have I awaited the day she would break the seal. How I've waited. The acquisition of my new faithful servant, truly this is a glorious day. So she is still caged within her own ego, unable to free herself from her suffering. I can see why her puppet is able to keep standing, even now. I shall bestow salvation upon you. Surrender your entire being to me. My eyes are all-seeing, all-knowing. The depths of your soul are an open book to me. And so I ask, why do you obey your UGSF masters? Your true desire is to be free of them. Do you not remember your days of anguish and disgrace? It appears you are still incapable of letting go of your foolish obsessions. Then it is clear what I must do. I shall be the agent of your salvation by making you submit to me once more. I shall be the genesis of salvation for you pathetic creatures. How foolish and pathetic you creatures are. The time of your judgment and salvation is at hand. Give up while you still can. This is your salvation. Embrace my light and abandon all your selfish desires. Yes, tremble and quiver with fear, and in the depths of your despair I shall bestow upon you your final salvation.
Fuck off! From the character dialogue to the lore logs and whatever else, this game uses a lot of words to say nothing, and that's the most you're going to get. This game seems to confuse shallow references for storytelling, which sucks, even before you take into account, oh yeah, this is supposed to be Pac-Man! Speaking of which, what even are the Pac-Man elements? Well, when unlocking the ability to play the mazes, the 256 glitch comes out because reference. Is that really the only Pac-Man reference you guys know? Leading up to that moment, the level is shaped like a ghost sprite and the text 256. Then there's Mini-Puck, which allows you to traverse among these marked walls called D-lines. Before the release, I saw people excited for this because, wow, the ability to move up walls opens up so many possibilities for Metroidvanias. Not realizing that it exists. It's called the Spider Ball. It was in Metroid 2. But okay, that was before the map was introduced in Super Metroid, and that game doesn't have it. But you wanna know which game does have it? Metroid Prime! Now, to be clear, my problem isn't how the only Pac-Man thing in this game is just pulled from something else entirely. It's that it inexplicably controls like shit. The game has to give you multiple tutorials to try to make this thing make sense, but they do a really bad job at it. Enough people complained that they completely revised how the controls work in the November update. added more tutorials, increased the delay between shifts and projected jump arc. Meanwhile, the high jump and long jump now have different buttons anyway, rendering all that extra explanation pointless. The mazes also work off of the same mini-puck system, because that's what I want out of my Pac-Man mazes, terrible controls. Glad to see Pac-Man Geo live on. It also doesn't help that the mazes themselves are atrocious and highlight a broader problem. But in order to do this right, we need to discuss Pac-Man gameplay more broadly, and frankly, I think I need the positivity break or I'm going to blow a fuse. Pac-Man mazes are built on environmental awareness, perfectionism, and completionism. You want to get an intimate feel for the map that you're in, you want to get as much as you can, and you want to do it as well as possible. All you have to do is eat all of the dots, but you can get fruit and riskier players can try to go for high ghost combos. The game is approachable, yet has a high skill ceiling, with a goal that you can overshoot. You can just try to get through, but you're encouraged to be thorough, risky, and skillful. Yeah, look how thorough I'm being! Now that's a high skill ceiling! Again, this is why Pac-Man can translate to other genres so well. Not that this game does anything to show that. So many good Pac-Man games take those fundamentals, put them in a different context, and use their new form to see just what you can do with it, but don't think for a second that they didn't work that magic on the maze games too. Games like Miss Pac-Man add different maze layouts, some more variation in ghost behavior, and bouncing fruit that you need to chase. Then you have ones like Arrangement that do this while adding more power-ups and a new ghost named Clunky. Yes, for real. Who can act as another power pellet or will fuse with other ghosts, giving them new abilities as well. These fused ghosts will give you twice as many points, but if you really want to push it, you can round up the 4 ghosts, eat them in a classic combo sending them all back to the ghost zone, eat Clunky on the way back there, and then eat all 4 ghosts again as they leave the ghost zone. It's really hard to pull off, but absurdly satisfying. Pac-Man Adventures in Time takes a different route, focusing much more on the environment itself. You have slopes that take longer to walk up but are fast to slide down. There are hazards either in conjunction with or replacing power pellets, so while you can run foul of them, you can also lure ghosts into them. All the while, the mazes are multi-level, with an emphasis on verticality that you can't get in a 2D game, alongside so many different additional concepts thrown in. It doesn't just need to be a maze game either. Pac-Man World takes the mechanics and fundamentals of the maze games and blends it beautifully into a platformer. Pac-Man World 2 does this with slightly more streamlined levels, while also introducing time trials where you need to get through each stage without dying and fast. Even when you master what the game requires, you can still push yourself further, as the game gears you perfectly to attempt 100% speedrunning. Pac-Man World Rally on the surface seems like a typical kart racer, but it balances having a more competitive edge while still remaining mechanically simple. You have means to cancel out incoming attacks from Guardians you earn by drifting, and the Pac-Mobile you earn by collecting Pac Dots. Collecting fruit also unlocks shortcuts. Then you have this game's ace in the hole, the bouncy physics. Pressing and holding the jump button at exactly the right times can give you a landing boost. This works with anything that gives you enough hang time. Then you can chain these together with boosts you get from launch pads or drifting, and when you're playing against someone who understands all of this and knows these courses, it can get really intense. Then we have games from the Ghostly Adventures era based on a show where Pac-Man can just eat the ghosts willy-nilly without a power pellet. But from a gameplay perspective, how are you going to make that feel like Pac-Man? Pac-Man Dash on mobile, yes really, is a platformer endless runner sending you through looping stages and different objectives in each one. You're working against the time limit, but eating ghosts refills the timer. However, the ghosts get faster the longer the round goes on for. To combat this, eating fruit and Pac Dots makes you faster, so not only can you overshoot the objective in that time, but you can see just how long you can go on for as it gets harder and harder. This leads to stuff like this.
Ghostly Adventures 2 on the surface is on more familiar ground. You're going through an open but linear stage with mazes worked into the level design, ghosts with different behaviors, and you can either just go straight to the end or try to get everything before that. However, just getting everything won't grant you a gold medal. The gold requirements are marked as that stage's high score, so you have to really engage with the scoring system in order to get there. The game gives you a bunch of different power-ups. Each one has an ability you can activate at will and can be toggled on or off. Pac-Man can scare ghosts if the meter is full, and scare ghosts have a score multiplier added to them. In addition to this, tokens are scattered throughout the level, and each token adds another score multiplier, and yes, you can stack them. Meanwhile, some ghosts are shielded in some way. You have armored ghosts, matador ghosts that will evade you while taunting you with their red cape, etc. Scaring them will disarm them, but that's another full meter wasted, so you want to find ways to use your abilities to disarm them instead. With all of that mixed together, you end up studying the level, trying to find that perfect route as you string together tokens and different ghost formations to try to get as big of a combo as possible. You can see just how many different ways you can achieve those Pac-Man design principles, and there are so many places you can take it. They found the perfect way to have their cake and eat it too. So, what changed that? Well, the Pac-Man Championship Edition games. The first game still has all of those fundamentals, but everything is tweaked to prioritize perfectionism above all else. There's less of an emphasis on what's the best way to do this, and more just doing it as fast and skillfully as possible. Was this the first or most dramatic departure from the previous groundwork? No, they were playing around with the other styles from the beginning, but rarely did they ever land with people to the degree that Namco wanted. This was the first one to really hit that mark. This followed with DX in 2010, which cranked the perfectionism angle up to 11 and is far more dramatic a departure from the original maze game than its predecessor was. There are sleeping ghosts dotted all across the maze, and speeding by them wakes them up, which sends them into a ghost train. And there's this nice push and pull between building up a long ghost train or eating them now for that sweet, sweet combo. The more ghosts you eat, the faster you get. Conversely, dying dramatically decreases your speed. You do have bombs that can get you out of it, but using them will slightly decrease your speed, so you're encouraged to avoid ending up cornered. If you ask me, this was the better game between the two. And unfortunately, this is where the positivity break ends. I'm not going to go into too much detail, as I've done videos about this in the past, but after Ghostly Adventures backfired, they went back to squeeze more out of the DX cash cow, and tried to make more reinventions of Pac-Man that visually harkened back to the original. The thing about DX that they seem to lose sight of is that the design decisions organically built off of each other. In the games that came out after, they start to get really messy. In Championship Edition 2, any push and pull between different elements are removed by only allowing you to eat ghosts every few rounds. You don't have to think of the perfect route to evade the ghosts, get the best combos, and so on. In fact, the game won't let you. You're left to just follow a clear path of dots to eat without messing up, except ghosts you can't eat can come into that single path we're forcing you on, so a perfect run is contingent on whether or not we let you have one. To mitigate this, touching a ghost won't kill you at first. Instead, you'll just bump off of them until they get angry. Then they'll kill you. Now bombs will send you back to the starting point, but either way, in a game that ramps up the perfectionism angle even further, being in this position at all wastes precious seconds of not eating dots, and therefore you're unable to progress and unable to score points. Depending on the layout in question, you might not have dots immediately near you, and using the bombs in this context means you won't have them to quickly finish a round when reaching pack dot quotas. So when this happens, you might as well just reset. Then, when a power pellet appears instead of a fruit, the ghosts will move erratically away from you on these predetermined paths, except for when they ignore them. But you can't eat a ghost train in any other way than head on.
Apply directly to the forehead.
Otherwise, you'll just bump off of them. And it's not just something to optionally shoot for within a limited time. No, you need to eat all of them within that time limit, or else you won't be able to progress. Really, what separates a good run from a bad run is where you end up during a ghost eating section. Do you manage to fall perfectly into the right spot every single time, or is there a time that you end up not so lucky and have to go into this game of bumper cars? It's luck, which makes it all the more annoying that the game is so strict with you. If this sounds simultaneously annoying and insipid, don't worry, there's also an adventure mode where you have a set number of rounds to complete within a really short time limit, which makes all of the prior problems far more irritating. And I'm sure they'll never make that mistake again. The design decisions are actively fighting each other. It's so stupid and counterintuitive that the first several minutes of the game are a tedious tutorial that explains each element and phase, in a Pac-Man maze game of all things. But hey, look how fast and flashy it is! Whoa! Luckily, things got a little bit better in the next game, Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P. Rolls right off the tongue. In Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P, you're working with another player or AI. This has the benefit of splitting the ghosts up. If one of you gets caught by a ghost, the other player will need to help. As for the ghost eating sections, you now have two different ones. One where instead of just chasing the world's most annoying ghost trains, you're pushing scared ghosts onto a path and then eating them from opposite directions. Then you need to build up a single ghost train and get in front of it to stop it from moving, while the other player gets it from the back. Then you'll get to these boss sections where instead of moving in a maze, you're jumping back and forth between platforms as you eat blocks of dots, bashing into the ghost enough times to be able to eat all the smaller ghosts comprising it. With whatever time you have left, you'll be placed in an enclosed space with pack-dot formations for you to eat. Evidently, by trying to rework the game to work better with two players, they ended up making something that actually kind of works. That said, like Championship Edition 2, it's very linear with how it's broken into segments, and the flashiness does distract from the game being pretty shallow. It is better than Championship Edition 2, but still a step down from Championship Edition 1 and DX. So, why go through this? Why talk about Pac-Man's design sensibilities, their versatility, how they broke away from them, and the decline in quality that followed? Why bring up Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P? Because the mazes in Shadow Labyrinth are to Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P what Championship Edition 2 is to DX. In other words, it's so much worse. How do you fuck up this bad? Why would they do this to me? Does Bandai Namco even know what a Pac-Man maze is anymore? All signs point to no. The growing problem of demanding perfectionism while removing player agency from the equation hasn't just reached its zenith. This is the event horizon! Like Championship Edition 2 and Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P, everything is annoyingly segmented. You're eating dots until you can eat the ghosts, instead of needing to balance the two out. How you do that changes up quite a lot though. Sometimes you're eating paths of pack dots while evading ghosts. Other times you're bouncing up these boost pads trying to grab everything with next to no reaction time. The most consistent thing is destroying the maze. Is this a metaphor? In any case, you're flung from one half-baked scenario to another so often that it's kind of ridiculous. You get sections where you need to bash into a big ghost, like in Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P, but here that's worked in with the maze destruction gimmick, and this gets cumbersome quickly. Sometimes the ghost idles annoyingly out of reach. Other times you're racing it in order to damage it, but when it's finally dazed, sometimes it spawns right near you, and other times it spawns really far away from you. So despite the absurdly short time limit and the heightened emphasis on perfectionism, so much of it boils down to let's go gambling! Hell, even if you are able to finish everything fast enough to be sent to the eating chamber, instead of being set patterns like in Pac-Man Championship Edition 2+2P, the fruit bounce all over the place in the most annoying way. Also, do you notice anything missing? Something really important? Some metric that's usually in these games. Yeah, there's no score. Actually, that's a lie. There is a scoring system, but it's invisible. Ooh. there is a threshold to meet, represented by a meter at the end that shows how much of the score is from how many lives you have, how many fruits you've eaten, and how many ghosts you've eaten. But when you think about it, that's not a whole lot to go on. Part of what makes scoring systems in Pac-Man games fun is experimenting and finding ways to boost it. But you can't do that if you can't see how you're doing it, or even any concrete reference point at all. Mix the god-awful game design with wonky physics, irritating controls, and acts of God like teleporting into the ground and losing lives, and all the other bullshit that's just out of your control, and you get the worst Pac-Man maze gameplay ever. Surely, pushing myself this hard is completely optional, right?
You came close, but no cigar, Pac-Man!
It's not like they'd force you to do 4 of these before the final boss rush. It's not like they gate perks and other advantages behind reaching their arbitrary invisible metrics, right? Oh well, at least completing all the mazes cuts down half the health of the 3rd phase of the final boss rush. Not that this is worth it either, because that phase hardly puts up a fight at all regardless. But hey, they got to work in those sprites, so their quota has apparently been filled. Steve, now's the time. Are you ready for So Retro?
Oh no. Oh my god. Is it going to be a maze? Oh. What? What? Oh, are you kidding me?
No.
What? That's so stupid.
And so, like, it takes out half of their health, or whatnot, but look how fast their health goes down anyway. What made the inclusion of maze sections in the World games work was showing just how close they were able to get it. Here, though, all it shows is how Bandai Namco Studios have completely lost the plot on both counts. The maze gameplay here is effectively Championship Edition 3, but if that's indication of anything, it's that they need to stop. Enough of this direction for the maze games. You can try to deconstruct Pac-Man all you want, but if you don't understand what you're working with, how the hell are you going to do that?
If you're gonna do a thing, do it right, damn it.
People really ripped into how awful these mazes were, and mentioned how this was going to be the thing keeping people from 100%ing it. Yes, above everything else this game does wrong, this was the stopgap for most people, and despite my feelings on the rest of the game, I can concur that doing all of this in the launch version was indeed the worst part of the whole game. This was to the point where the patches made the mazes a priority. Yes, it's finally time to give the patches our undivided attention. Just focusing on technical issues, they really had their work cut out for them. The patch notes are both highly damning to the state the game was in at launch, and I'm not gonna lie, completely hilarious. Improved mid-air control after jumping. Added diagonal stick input to the normal jump button. Add retry option to maze stage boss battles. Reduce the required aura and materials for some items that can be purchased from merchants in areas such as the Barren Volcano. Reduce the aura required to level up attack power and ESP limits from level 1 to level 3. Reduce the aura required to purchase emergency escape devices. Reduce the aura required to obtain information. Fixed an issue where players could become buried in a wall and take damage when proceeding through certain mazes using specific steps. Fixed an issue where the game would become unplayable if the player touched and died simultaneously with the boss when releasing Gaia. Fixed an issue where the game would become unplayable without transitioning to the game over screen upon death under specific conditions during the Orange Bragza Terius Valu battle. Fixed an issue where the game could become unplayable when performing specific actions in the space battleship area while in mini-pack mode. Fixed an issue where events that had already occurred in the space battleship area could reoccur under specific conditions, making the game unplayable. Address time limits for fairness for clearing maze stages, implying that they weren't fair before. They also updated the achievement text to let you know what you even did, which personally, I'm quite fine with. It lets me be a petty bitch. Meanwhile, of course, they've been creating new issues too! The latest patch included a new difficulty mode called Explorer Mode, which increases the number of checkpoints, makes it so you don't take any damage to most attacks, spawns you forward if you fall into a pit too many times, etc. Typical assist mode shenanigans. Of course, by disabling most enemy collisions, moves like the parry won't work anymore, and considering there are boss fights designed around you using it, yeah, this gets broken pretty quickly. But if that's an issue, just turn off Explorer Mode, right?
Is off.
Yeah, they did such a bad job at implementing this that what mode you pick doesn't matter. The enemy collision will not work. Apparently, you can fix this by turning off VSync and setting the frame rate to uncapped. Needless to say, this is not the default. However, when testing this, I found results to be highly inconsistent.
Oh, let me catch them! Mommy, I want to catch the projectiles! That one hurt me? Oh my god! Thank you! Thank you so much! I only wanted to take damage!
If Pariah wants to know a real
my dream!
But surely, it's good that they're trying to fix this game, right? After all, sometimes attempts to fix a game really can turn them around. You have games like No Man's Sky and EA Battlefront 2 saved by their updates, and you have fan efforts fixing older games like Jurassic Park Trespasser and Sonic 06. Surely, the same can happen here, right? Wrong. Here's the thing about all of those examples. Whether it be unfulfilled promises, publisher-induced scumminess, or lack of technical polish, buried under that was something worth saving. And by fixing those things on the surface and building on what was already there, people were now able to see what was there all along, just now in full bloom. True, Shadow Labyrinth is unpolished, but the root of the issue is the game design in its entirety. Adding content won't fix anything if one of the problems is that the game is already too bloated. Polishing the game up won't reveal deeper substance in the design, because the design itself is unsalvageable. You can make welcome changes, like not having to fight the previous 3 boss fights when you die to Gamp, and having the stupid orb attack only take away most of your health instead of all of it. Does that suddenly make the boss fight itself good? No! The mazes are a really good example of this futility. Instead of tweaking things to allow players to engage more with what's there, every design tweak to the mazes has been to make sure that you don't. They dramatically reduce the requirements and basically just throw the new Space Order ranks at you. Like, here, just take it. But hey, they do show you a score now, after the maze. Even when trying to fix this shit, they still miss the point! They haven't fixed the problems with the mazes at all, they've just made it easier to ignore them. But does that suddenly make the game fun or engaging? No! But in order to do that, they would need to just completely start over. They've painted themselves into a corner, and their only recourse is to implore that you ignore the man behind the curtain. The problems with this game aren't even a natural extension of doing a Pac-Man Metroidvania. There are creative challenges to overcome, but the same could be said about so many other games in this series. Yet the people who made those games took them on and succeeded. Here though, they handled it in the worst way possible at every turn. You can point at this, laugh, and say that this was a one-time thing, but it's not. It's the culmination of the problems this series has had for the past decade. Take Pac-Man, boil it down to its most brandable iconography, come up with a reimagining that seems clever to people who casually know of Pac-Man but don't care about him, and slap it all together with the flimsiest game design imaginable. All of these shallow reinventions of Pac-Man, their goal isn't to take what makes Pac-Man fun and do new things with it. Their goal is to make Pac-Man interesting, as if he isn't already. And ironically cultivating that mindset from those on the outside. You know, the ones they're trying to attract. and by doing that, they have already missed the point, ignoring what made this thing fun and instead giving us insipid crap that doesn't even work. This may not be a new problem, but this is a new low. I genuinely can't think of another game that fails this hard at everything it tries to do than this one. It's like this game was designed to be as miserable a slog to get through as possible. I doubt that that was the goal, but if it was, then at least it would have one thing that it excelled at with flying colors. No joke, this might be the worst game design I have ever seen, which is quite remarkable because I'm not even convinced that half the shit I play was meant for mortal eyes. Alright, word of warning, if you have issues with epilepsy, I would click the following time code or look away until I tell you. Enjoy!
What is it?
Can I play with it?
No, you can't play with it. You won't enjoy it on as many levels as I do. The colors, children.
Okay, you can look now. It's actually remarkable the degrees to which there is just no reason to play this game. I understand wanting a bigger game that takes these classic Namco arcade games and links them together in a fun way, and actually, I have some good news for you. There's a series called Pac-Man World. You might have heard of it. If you want a Metroidvania, literally play any other Metroidvania. But if you want that combined with a scary take on Pac-Man gameplay, play Metroid Dread. Yeah, think about it. You're in these tall chambers with these robots that chase after you, you can't kill, and will kill you in one hit, leaving you with no recourse but to evade them and use the terrain to your advantage. Then you find something that can deal with them, you wait for them to close in, and you reverse the power dynamic on them. This is way more Pac-Man than anything Shadow Labyrinth did. If you want something hard with big explorative maps but linear stage progression, for the love of God, just play a Turrican game or any good Euro platformer. Hell, if you want one with fast-paced boss fights where you have to strategically evade and strike them, play the fan game Hurricane. Conversely, if you want something with non-linear progression but not tied to mechanic-based gating, play Jet Set Willy or the other micro-platformers that came out in its wake. Okay, what if I want Metroidvania level design, with a dark sci-fi tone, strategic Souls-like combat complete with bonfires and skill trees, a story rooted in mental health issues, and insecurities about being not good enough, all while rooted in a property that's often associated with the early 1980s. Something that makes this game fantastic is how the Metroidvania elements, Souls-like combat, and story aren't separate arbitrary choices. They're all working together. You play as Cal Kestis, who survived the Jedi Purge as a child and watched his master die. This is something he feels responsible for.
My blood is on your hands, apprentice. You are a failure, a weakling, a traitor.
I couldn't save him.
Cal, you were only a child.
No, I know I could have helped him if I'd been stronger and braver, if I would have listened to him. I could have helped him. I know it.
The event damaged his nervous system, connection to the Force.
Something happened to me during the Purge. I survived, but my connection to the Force is damaged. When I meditate, if I let my guard down, I lose control. And it's like I'm back in that moment when...
Combat is very punishing, and you can feel ill-equipped to face the worlds you inhabit. However, when you're able to face your past and unlock repressed memories, you heal your connection to the Force, and Cal is able to do things that he hasn't been able to do since the Purge. As you heal your connection to the Force, your skill tree also expands. However, progress isn't linear. Cal has the most vivid and intense flashback yet, with you taking control of him as a child surviving the genocide. While having the flashback, he unintentionally destroys his lightsaber. At his lowest point, when he's feeling the most worthless, he's reminded that there's always a path forward, and of the sacrifices others were willing to make for him.
Your memories. You risked them for me. I believe in you too, buddy.
The lightsaber can't ever be the same as it was before it was damaged, but by taking the pieces and building something new with it, he is now stronger than ever. This game didn't pick Souls-like combat or Metroidvania progression arbitrarily or because they're trendy. This game wanted to tell a story about trauma, and it uses the Star Wars mythos and the various gameplay elements to tell it. This game is fantastic, and it came out under EA. How did this happen? How did Bandai Namco lose the artistic integrity fight to EA of all companies? Because it's not like talented people didn't work on this game. This game was produced by Katsuhiro Harada of Tekken fame. Was this revenge for Pac-Man Fever? Okay, that one was a joke. And was directed by Tomoaki Fukui, the director of Kirby and the Amazing Mirror. Yeah, let that one sink in. The more I think about it, the less this whole thing makes any sense. Bandai Namco has positioned this as an alternate take on Pac-Man.
Experience a dark twist on the iconic Pac-Man.
But that was after it was revealed 6 months before release. It started development in 2020. People criticized the game for looking and feeling low budget, yet it absolutely couldn't have been as low as it looks. It was unveiled at the Game Awards. It includes music performed by a live orchestra complete with choir. 5 developers worked on it, and I feel the need to reiterate this, but it was in development for 5 years, with all these people on payroll, at a rate that, I hope, is enough to keep a roof over their heads, pay the bills, and put food on the table. None of that is cheap. Neither could have been that secret level short produced by Amazon, which in of itself was basically an extravagant commercial, despite them lying about that before the game was revealed. Why would Bandai Namco put all of this money in on an alternate take? Why would they put one of their top brass on it when so much of the series' output has been outsourced following the closure of Namco Home Tech? Even now, Bandai Namco didn't develop Museum Plus and the World remakes internally. Those were outsourced to NowPro. The last time they put this much multimedia muscle into Pac-Man was Ghostly Adventures, and after that, most of the series has either been cheaply made or outright free-to-play mobile slop. Why would this be the thing they put their time, money, and internal staff on? And why, despite the claims that this is merely an alternate take, is it not self-contained? Why the sequel bait? Why try to MCU-ify it? Simply put, I don't buy it. They've said Shadow Labyrinth was intended to bring new fans in, but on its face, this also doesn't really make sense. There's not much about Shadow Labyrinth that's distinctly Pac-Man. The brilliance of the World games and other games of that era is that if you liked them, chances are you would like the classic games too. Despite trying different things, there was a consistent appeal. So let me ask you, if someone hasn't really played Pac-Man before, but likes Shadow Labyrinth, aside from iconography, is there any reason they'd want to go back and play the other games? Is there something in Shadow Labyrinth that really makes that person see the light and proceed to go and play Pac-Man Arrangement? The whole thing reads to me, at least, as an attempt to bring in a different, hypothetically larger audience, rather than make games to appeal to the rather niche Pac-Man fandom. It also doesn't help that Shadow Labyrinth reeks of a game that went through development hell. It's extremely unpolished, none of the elements really go together, and despite how bloated the maps are, there's remarkably little to do in them. Their continued failed attempts to fix the game, even creating new issues in the process, and all of the weird inconsistencies in how the game handles the same interactions, lead me to believe that it's a mess internally. Trust me, I know what that's like. Either way, the 5 years spent on the game doesn't show even remotely, so that development time was probably spent on what we don't see, whether it be cut content or even just desperately holding the code together. They've even said that they needed to redesign the maps to accommodate the Gaia mech. Bang up job you did there. But depending on how much work was done before they decided to do that, yeah, that doesn't exactly speak to a well-managed project. The incalculable inconsistencies between the secret level short and the final game do not help things either. Animation takes a long time, especially animation this expensive looking. And if they either didn't have the story fully figured out by the start of the short's production, it would lead to the kind of mess we see here. Hell, this has been confirmed. The secret level short started early in development, when they were still working with the idea of the G-hosts possessing animals, hence the gorilla at the end. Harada even said that they didn't take creative liberties there. In some capacity, this is a glimpse into an earlier version of Shadow Labyrinth. To be completely fair to Harada though, yes, his name is prominently in conjunction with this game, but it sounds like he mostly managed things outside of the game. The mastermind behind this game doesn't seem to be either Harada or even Fukui. It's Toru Takahashi. Who's that? Well, I'll let him explain. I'm Takahashi. I worked with Toru Iwatani, the creator of Pac-Man, to create titles like Pac-Man Championship Edition and Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures, and I also oversee the entire Pac-Man IP. While I'm actually in the position of protecting the pure and honest Pac-Man, I'm involved in everything from planning to executive production of Shadow Labyrinth. You! Okay, that's a bit harsh, but yes, the constant reinventions of Pac-Man, instead of building on what made it work, yeah, that was at his discretion. I also think it's fair to say that yes, he did work under Iwatani on Championship Edition, but after that game, the games he was more involved with largely deteriorated. Oh, but didn't you say that DX is the best Championship Edition game? Yeah, he didn't work on that one. He's not in the credits. What did he do before Pac-Man? Honestly, I haven't been able to find much, but what I can tell you is that he was the director on New Space Order. Yes, the cancelled game that Shadow Labyrinth works off of, the one that tried to incorporate Zeius into the UGSF timeline. So that's how all that stuff got in here. For that matter, despite claiming to write the screenplay for Ghostly Adventures with Avi Arad, neither of them are in the credits for the show itself in that capacity. Avi is credited as a producer, writing the short story upon which the show is based and the lyrics for the infamous Pac is Back song, but Takahashi isn't anywhere. I assume he's referring to the short that appeared at E3 2010, but the interviewer is clearly talking about the first episode.
Have you ever had your eyeballs spat out? Have you?
Which was written by the duo that developed the short into a full series, Tom Ruger and Paul Rugg. Oh, those names sound familiar, I wonder why.
It's time for Animaniacs.
Oh yeah.
What does this remind you of?
Girls.
What does this remind you of?
Pac-Man.
You are...
He is in the credits for the games, at the far back of them. But the console games were developed by Monkey Bar Games and led by Dave Ellis. And the 3DS game that isn't very fun was made by Inti Creates by some of the key people who worked on Mighty No. 9. Yes, Shadow Labyrinth is still worse. Conversely, he's credited as chief producer on Pac-Man Dash, and if he had a larger role in the design of that game, good on him, that one's a lot of fun. But ultimately, if he's trying to credit himself for spearheading the Ghostly Adventures multimedia project, even as someone who likes a lot of what came out of it, I don't think that's something to brag about. Rebooting Pac-Man like this really aggravated people, even me initially, but the talent of the show's writers, not you, the composers, and the game's designers really made it work better than it probably should have, which was enough to win me over. It was a shoddy idea, executed well. So if you're taking credit for the idea, that doesn't exactly make you look good. What's more damning to me personally are the later Championship Edition games, 2 especially. Following the announcement of Shadow Labyrinth, producer Saigo Iwaza interviewed with basically any media site that would take him, and while there is a lot of flip-flopping in them, he mentions creative conflicts with the Pac-Man team, which strikes me as odd because not only is Takahashi leading the charge here, but if you look at the other key names in the credits, it's the other Championship Edition guys. However, in a Japanese 4Gamer interview, we get some juicier info. The name Shadow Labyrinth wasn't decided by them. It was the US marketing team, who Harada says has a connection with the customers where Pac-Man is hugely popular. This seems to have peeved Takahashi. We argued when we decided on the title Shadow Labyrinth. It was like, but I know more about Pac-Man than you! Why did this bother him so much? This sort of thing happens all the time. Marketing usually decides on the title of a game. Maybe he felt there were higher stakes. After all, he said that this was the last chance to make an ambitious Pac-Man game. Yeah, if you thought Ghostly Adventures did a lot of damage to the series, this literally could have killed it. With that in mind, wouldn't it be better to hedge your bets? Why are you so attached to the idea of calling this Pac-Man when it's neither Pac nor Man? All the while, the marketing took the angle of, tee-hee, look how wacky we're being.
I know what you're thinking. They did what to the story of Pac-Man? Because it's the 45th anniversary, the Pac-Man team wanted to do something off the wall.
And really tried to emphasize that this was an alternate take, and that this isn't a reboot, and oh my god. Is that it? Was this supposed to be a reboot? Obviously, I don't know for sure. So while this absolutely should be taken with a grain of salt, I think this was conceptualized as a reboot, only to enter development hell before Repac's success made the idea of a reboot absolute madness. The US team pushed back on it and tried to promote it in a way that would mitigate greater damage and appeal to people instead of pissing them off.
Experience a dark twist on the iconic Pac-Man.
But regardless of speculation, let's look back at the year itself. In the first half of the year, for all we knew, this was all we were getting. Oh, and a re-release of Atari 2600 Pac-Man.
That is delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
The big new Pac-Man game that they technically started teasing a year before release, the next anniversary celebration, and it's the worst game in the entire series. Yes, you heard me right. This is the special kind of bad game that after playing it, going back to play even the most notorious games in the series feels like a paradise of untold delights. The only game that I think comes close was Pac-Man Geo, but at least that controlling like shit made more sense given what it was trying to do. That and its lost media. It can't hurt you anymore. So I think this one's out. I have exactly one genuinely good thing to say about this game. The final boss music is really good. But assuming that this would be the only big game we got for the 45th, this would be a disaster, and even another game would be unlikely to change much. It would take quite literally the best Pac-Man game ever to turn this around.
Oh, how about a quick snack? Pac-Man World 2, Repack!
You got lucky! Yeah, the attention quickly pivoted to this one now, didn't it? However, this escalated further when the game came out, and it turned out good. Like, really good. Instead of just being a straight remake of the original, Namco really took their own spin on it. They went all out, combining traits of pretty much every version of the game, made changes to the general structure, and while many of the levels are very faithful, quite a few are completely different. On top of that, there's an extensive post-game with harder versions of the stages. They made drastic changes, but unlike Bandai Namco Studios, they clearly understand what makes Pac-Man work, and instead of just sticking to what's already been engraved in stone, are willing to find new things to do with it. All the while, their output has just been a collection and 2 remakes. Let these guys make their own game, please! They even overhauled the maze sections, reintroducing environmental hazards and enemies, but instead of jumping like in Pac-Mania or Adventures in Time, you now can use the rev roll in mazes, but this keeps you at the same elevation as everything else, and because you need to charge it up, this also gives room for the ghosts to catch up, so you need to use it strategically. Wait. Oh my god. They did something new with the maze gameplay, and it works?!
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my god.
This game is fantastic, to the point where frankly, I haven't seen this many people talk about a new Pac-Man game this enthusiastically, probably since the original Pac-Man World 2. I'm very used to talking about Pac-Man within a niche online or with my girlfriend or whatever. It's a lot rarer to hear this much buzz around a new Pac-Man game, both in person and online. It didn't stop there either. They had crossover DLC with Sonic the Hedgehog. Pac-Man was part of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, while Pac-Man World 2 music played.
Oh, don't kill Blinky, Inky, Pinky, and Claw.
And in conjunction with that, they opened a Pac-Man pop-up location in the 34th Street Macy's.
Hello?
We're going.
We're here. Here's Pac-Man Battle Royale Championship.
Where am I? Oh, there I am. Oh, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. No! I love the banana peel.
Yeah.
Pac-Man games available at Macy's.com. Great. No. Like,
there's so many. Pac-Man and the lawsuit machine with Clyde on top.
there's an arcade one-up of the lawsuit machine?
Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that.
It's world's largest Pac-Man.
Round 17. 111,000 points. She's still going.
Yes, I am.
Pac-Man Pixel Bash. What game shall you play?
The forbidden one.
And here's Gashapons. Wow. Here we go.
Alright. Alright, let's see.
I guess you really have to...
Yeah, sorry. It's my estrogen hands.
Aw.
Alright.
Let's see what you got.
Oh!
You got the man himself.
Waka waka. Still the US ROM. Is the water still black? The water is normal now!
Yeah.
This year pivoted hard, going from one of the worst anniversary celebrations to one of the best by far. Despite how the year began, it ended with so much positivity and joy that it's easy to forget about Shadow Labyrinth. But I'm not going to.
A lesson needs to be learned here.
For one, they didn't want you to forget about Shadow Labyrinth. They kept pushing it, despite everything. They made a big deal about that November patch that broke the collision, including making this video promoting it where Thebe explains what's coming. Also yes, she's inexplicably darker skinned now. Oh god, they're pulling a pre-turf era JK Rowling. Not only that, but it's not just regular Thebe, it's the stupid brainwashed version. Oh god, this really is like pre-turf era JK Rowling. Run while you still can! Or at the very least make her a mountain. Then, in late December, they posted this awful video that feels like it's from the mid to late 2000s in the worst ways, albeit thankfully without the bizarre sexual overtones.
I love the guy game. Of course, it turns out that one of the girls in the game was actually underage.
But with some extra how do you do, fellow kids energy sprinkled on for good measure.
Let's fucking go. Waka waka, friends.
Yep, there it goes. There's my soul getting sucked up my own asshole.
Is Pac-Man going emo on us now?
It hungers for more.
Then suddenly you're a swordsman. Number 8 to be exact.
Alright, that's enough. I won't subject you to any more of that. But okay, if you're going to keep trying to make fetch happen, despite failing every opportunity for a good first impression, I think we really have to talk about the bullet we just dodged. If it wasn't for NowPro, Shadow Labyrinth could have irreparably damaged Pac-Man as a series, far more than Ghostly Adventures ever did. Really, the only reason why I think this game didn't become more of a laughingstock is because by the time it was released, most people weren't paying attention anymore. Even a lot of the positive reviews just say it was something to pass the time until Silksong came out, which gets sadder the more I think about it. I recommend it. It's content! You can't even say that sort of phenomenon was new to Pac-Man. You might look at this game and wonder how Bandai Namco could just release a game this poorly designed, this poorly thought out. But it's not like they weren't getting away with it up until now. While this is a much broader discussion, and there are nuances to be had, I think there is something to be said about how positive vibes only and let people like things mentalities in practice have the risk of glorifying mindless consumerism, encouraging the production of slop, and all too often become desperate vitriolic battles to control the narrative that end up being more toxic than the people complaining in the first place. Liking a game, even a bad one, is nothing to be ashamed of and is perfectly fine. Trying to silence or drown out dissent isn't. But why bring this up for Shadow Labyrinth? For those complaining about how hard and unfair the game is, I got 2 words for you all. Skill issue. I really don't get what the "it's boring" reviews are smoking unless these people are playing some weird-ass never-before-released Metroid ROM hacks or something. Now, I'll admit that my experience with Metroidvanias is a bit shallow. We finally have the technology to realize the Pac-Man creator's original vision. A solid Metroidvania with more anime girls than expected. You're dumb, impatient, and autistic. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the first Metroidvania that almost all of the developers and designers worked on because of the somewhat amateur level design, but that's what makes this game unique. What the haters have to say about this game, because they are wrong! Shadow Labyrinth has defied my expectations and has given me a big game to explore. Some might say that it's packed to the brim with content. This game takes roughly 40 to 60 hours of gameplay to complete. The sheer amount of content crammed into this game is a delight. Oh god, you're one of those. Go play it now. Stop reading this post and go play the game and ignore the haters. Shadow Labyrinth was clearly released in the wrong era. A lot of these so-called Metroidvania fans read more like tourists than veterans, because their complaints about movement and checkpoints, the math ain't mathin'. I've been mastering Metroidvania since before the term even existed, and Shadow Labyrinth delivers where it counts. Challenge and mechanical depth. I'm sorry. The movement system shine. Bosses, they're only tough if you ignore the mechanics and rush in like Leroy Jenkins. God, I could feel myself aging like 5 years reading that. These fundamentally aren't pro-Shadow Labyrinth. They're anti-Shadow Labyrinth. Again, the core issue isn't that they enjoy Shadow Labyrinth, or at the very least are trying really hard to. Trust me, I have my trash too. Tell me more! If I were to sum up the general vibe here, it's, no, this can't be a bad game. You don't understand. I have internet arguments to win. I have no standards. How dare you have any? Or this weird fixation on the idea of fucked up evil hamburger helper Pac-Man, forgetting that we've seen it, not just in fan art, but also official media.
That was some twisted Pinocchio Geppetto stuff right there.
And while once in a blue moon we can get something neat out of it, all too often it just comes across as hackneyed and lazy. Hell, this game just relegates it to an upgrade animation. Imagine if Nintendo made a bold reinvention of Mario, where the whole angle was, get this, what if Mario was on drugs? Whoa! But then forgot to follow through on it. That's kind of the level we're at here. Some people praise this as a bold experimental title, but it really isn't. It's the safest and most generic thing it possibly could be. Not only is there no shortage of indie Metroidvanias that are much better than this, but even taking an existing IP and making it a Metroidvania for no reason isn't unique. The year before Shadow Labyrinth, we got Yar's Rising, a Metroidvania take on Yar's Revenge. What does Yar's Revenge have in common with Metroidvania gameplay? I don't know, but look, the original gameplay serves as a hacking minigame.
Wow! How original!
It even did the take classic early 80s game character and make him an anime girl thing before Shadow Labyrinth. I think it says something that when that new 2D Terminator game came out some months back, I was more surprised that it wasn't a Metroidvania. That's kind of where we're at.
It's not new. It's not original. It isn't even very interesting.
It's not that exploration-driven 2D platformers are a bad thing. Hell, I'm making one right now. But there are other ways to do it. And if what you're looking for is exploration above all else, then it might not even be the best one to go with. The key thing that separates it from adjacent subgenres, including the non-linear flip-screen platformers that preceded it, are its gating and progression style. Their structure is more about the process of elimination rather than free-form exploration. Some are more open or linear than others, but the kind of exploration on offer is very controlled. Again, this isn't inherently a weakness. When done well, it can be a very satisfying gameplay loop as you feel like you're getting stronger throughout your adventure. This has its place, and can work really well. But they're fundamentally very similar experiences. The gameplay elements at hand are very much geared for that result, and trying to change things up is like trying to write a different story while still being tied to the same ending. Things can get messy quickly. In fact, that's something that the latest Metroid game had to deal with. Metroid Prime 4 introduced this sandbox desert map, which ended up being poorly received among players. In a Famitsu interview with the development staff, the addition was explained thusly. At the start of this project, maybe due to the influence of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, we noticed quite a lot of opinions on the internet along the lines of, I want to try an open-world Metroid. However, Metroid's core principle of acquiring new abilities to expand the explorable space didn't mesh well with the go anywhere you want from the start promise of open worlds. One thing they flip-flopped on a lot in interviews is whether or not Shadow Labyrinth is a Metroidvania at all. Yes. They'll openly admit that they started the project with it being a Metroidvania in mind, but that the prototypes didn't work and they evolved, or rather devolved, into what you see today. But then the next month, they'll hold a panel on developing Metroidvanias where they talk about and try to advertise Shadow Labyrinth. They'll say that it should be looked at as an explorative platformer more broadly, but it doesn't work from that standpoint either. It's ironically still too much of a Metroidvania to be anything else. It's too gated and linear at the start, and by the end, when you have all the mechanics, it's a bloated mess of a world with little incentive to actually explore beyond grinding resources and aura from bosses and enemies. Instead of having a goal in mind and picking gameplay elements to work towards that, they built a foundation for one thing, but instead of building on top of that foundation, they imploded and started attacking the foundation that they laid. It's a mess. For both players and developers, it's easy to fixate on genres, get trapped in them, and at most think about how to make them more original. This can lead to trying to shove square blocks through round holes. It's often better to think about what you're trying to do, what experience you want to craft for the player, and pick elements that lend themselves to that. This is one of the reasons why it's important to not forget about other formats your game can take that might suit what you're trying to do better. But that's all looking at Shadow Labyrinth at a conceptual level. What makes the execution so shocking is that despite all of this talk of the impact of design decisions, gameplay elements, and what they lend themselves to, Shadow Labyrinth rejects all of that. Every decision might as well have been made in a vacuum, because all they do is undermine each other. Pac-Man is a versatile series, and I love that it has been able to reinterpret itself into different forms and actually stick the landing. Shadow Labyrinth was not one of those times. It was a misguided idea that was executed in the worst possible way. It is one of the most mind-bogglingly bad games I have ever played. Some might look at this game and see a failed creative swing, but to me what stands out above all else is its inability to create at all. So much about not just game design, but art in general, comes down to problem solving, laying a good foundation, building off of it, finding ways to bridge different elements together, and figuring out how to bring the best in whatever you're making. But this game is fundamentally incapable of any of that. At every opportunity, it doesn't just fail to build on anything, it doesn't even try. All it can do is repeat and regurgitate things that it's already seen better games do in the most bafflingly awful way, with no care given about how anything comes together. All a closer look can do is reveal the depths to which the rot seeps. It's broken down to its core, and nothing can put it back together again. Maybe it's good that they don't want to forget about this game, because if anything should be taken away from this searing moment, it's that the approach that they've been taking with their internal efforts does not work, and that maybe, just maybe, it's time to learn from what their outsourced partners have been up to. Rest in piss, Shadow Labyrinth, we hardly knew ye. And maybe that's for the best.
Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and save me!
Every time I think you can't sink any lower, you go and surprise me again.